What happened when world leaders gathered to shape the future of global trade, but instead it turned into the one of the most controversial trade meeting in history? Hi, welcome to KKlass. Today we are diving into the third World Trade Organization Ministerial Conference, the Seattle Round in 1999. A meeting that was meant to open new doors for international trade, but instead sparked massive protests, debates, and ultimately ended in failure. So, what's went wrong, and why is this event still significant in global trade discussions today? Let's find out. Before we dive into what happens in Seattle, let's first understand the background. The World Trade Organization was established in 1995, replacing the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade to regulate global trade more effectively. The previous trade negotiations, known as Uruguay Round in 1986 to 1994, led to the creation of World Trade Organization but led several unresolved issues. At the Seattle conference, world leaders had several major trade issues to discuss. These includes the agriculture subsidies. Developing nations want rich countries to reduce the subsidies they give to their farmers, which make global trade unfair. Labor and environmental standards. The US and EU pushed for including labor rights and environmental protections in trade agreements, which developing nations saw as a way to restrict their exports. Next is market access. Developing nations want easier access to international market, especially in developed countries, while wealthier nations hesitated to reduce their trade barriers. World Trade Organization reforms. Many countries demanded more transparency in World Trade Organization decision making. Intellectual property rights. There are disagreements over strict patent protection, particularly in the pharmaceutical industries. These issues created major tension between developed and developing countries. Despite the high expectation, the Seattle conference faced several challenges inside the conference room. World Trade Organization members struggled to find common ground on key trade policies. Developed countries such as US and European Union could not agree on reducing their agriculture subsidies. At the same time, developing nations strongly opposed adding labor and environmental conditions to the trade agreements. Meanwhile, outside the conference, tension escalated. Over 40,000 protesters, including labor union, environmental activists, and anti globalization groups, gathered in Seattle to protest WTO policies. They argued that World Trade Organization rules favored big corporations over workers and the environment. The protest turned into riots, and police had to use the tear gas and force to control the crowd. The situation became known as the Battle of Seattle, and it's disrupted to entire conference. So, did the Seattle round succeed or failure? The answer is clear. It ended in failure as World Trade Organization member could not reach any agreement. The conference collapsed due to major disagreements between developed and developing nations, a lack of preparations and poor coordinations among WTO officials, political pressure from protests which disrupted the meeting and created global controversy. Although the Seattle round fails, it had a lasting impact on international trade and globalization. Here are the key effects. Delayed trade negotiation. WTO had to restrict its approach before launching the Doha round in 2001. Increased public scrutiny. The world became more aware of the flaws in global trade policies. Call for WTO reforms. Developing nations and the activists demand greater fairness and transparency in trade negotiations. Rise of anti-globalization movements. The protesters in Seattle inspired future demonstration against global economic policies. So that's how the Seattle became one of the most disrupted trade meeting in history, shaping WTO negotiations for years to come. Thanks for watching.